My question is in regarding to the opening statements you made. You said that the midterm elections would be a referendum of the past. Do you believe that this referendum will be focused on national security? Because from our previous speakers, people have been talking about the pocketbook. I have to be honest. The American public has been manipulated. 75 cents a gallon decrease since the last month. So do you believe this will be about pocketbook or the war in Iraq?
Well, obviously, different voters will vote on different issues, and not just those two, incidentally. Some people will vote for a candidate they feel will, a Senate candidate, for example, who will support Supreme Court justices or oppose Supreme Court justices that they don't like, and others will vote on a whole bunch of other criteria. So I tend to think, I don't know, in this kind of, probably the rising gas prices for most of the last year and a half probably hurt Bush. The decline, partial decline over the last 6 to 8 weeks has probably helped him some, but I'm a little skeptical of the pocketbook arguments. I mean, I think that does tend to assume that voters are very sort of, purely care about economics and about their pocketbook in a very sort of simple sense. I think they have a broader concern about the future of the country, and right now people are worried about the future of the country, and that's hurting the incumbent party, the governing party, the Republicans. If people do think the war, and obviously part of that's thinking that the war in Iraq was either a mistake or badly fought. So I don't know, it's hard to disentangle these individual issues. You see all these polls where they ask different questions, but what I'm struck by is when you look at the polls, these questions move up and down together. People don't really disentangle in their own thinking, gee, I'm optimistic about the economy, but pessimistic about the war. And, it sort of gets muddled together, and people make a general judgment, I think, usually, about, is my senator or my congressman doing a pretty good job? Is he voting the way I kind of want him to vote or not?
Politics and policies aside, I want to wrap up by asking you about the political strengths and weaknesses of a couple of individuals. First of all, President Reagan.
I came to Washington to work as a foot soldier in the Reagan Revolution in 1985. I would say obviously he was a great communicator and all that, and charming man. What's underappreciated about Reagan was his sort of ideological stability and solidity for decades. He read stuff in the late 40s and 50s and 60s that formed his thinking and really guided him throughout. And I think on most of those things he was right. So for me, that's good. For others, that was, of course, terrible. But I think it gave him a kind of grounding that even his opponents came to respect, and also meant he wasn't too spooked by, plus 3 points here or minus 2 points there in some opinion poll. I mean, he kept his economic policies going through a very nasty recession in 81, 82, after they'd first been passed, which hurt the Republicans in Congress in 82. But he believed in lower taxes and tight money and deregulation, and he kind of just pushed ahead on that. It's impressive. There are not that many politicians who are like that.
President Bill Clinton.
Extremely talented, the most personally talented politician I think I've ever met. Charming, super smart, obviously, and in domestic policy, a pretty good president from my point of view, because he basically didn't try to go back to 60s liberalism, accepted a certain amount of neoconservatism, if I can say. The welfare reform bill didn't really raise taxes very much, got along decently with a Republican Congress, even despite all the political fighting. Foreign policy, I just think, good on a couple of things like the Balkans, but ultimately not serious enough about the threats that were building up sort of behind the scenes, though to be fair to him, it's not as if most Republicans in Congress were that serious about it either.
And then finally, kind of a redux of 2000, George W. Bush and Al Gore. Strengths and weaknesses politically as candidates for national office.
My honest view is that neither was a very good candidate, actually. As McCain would have clobbered Gore, or a better Democrat would have clobbered Bush. Bush was a 6-year governor of Texas, awkward, I would say, as a campaigner, had a nice, decent man, and that came through, I think, and a certain strength of character, which I think is true. But I don't think he ran a particularly good campaign, frankly, in 2000. He staggered through at the end. Gore, obvious problems, I think, in just sort of communicating with voters. I've always thought the Gore campaign, I say this as a Republican who voted for Bush, I think the Gore campaign did a very good job in those last 2 weeks. People forget how much Gore tightened on Bush and obviously ended up winning the plurality of the popular vote and coming awfully close in Florida. I would say Gore is underrated, though. I don't like him personally. It's not he doesn't have my views, and I find him sanctimonious. But I think Gore, if he ran for the Democratic nomination in 2008, would be a formidable candidate in the Democratic primaries. He was right on the war from a Democratic point of view, i.e. he was against this war. On the other hand, he's not just an instinctive dove. He supported the first Gulf War. He supported the war in the Balkans. He has experience in the White House. If I were a Democratic political consultant, I would sort of like to have Al Gore as my candidate in 07, 08. I think he's a strong candidate for the Democratic primaries. And then I think all my Republican friends would say, oh, well, we could beat Gore in a general. But I don't know. Gore's never lost an election except for 2000, you know? So I think Gore is an underrated, it's not really my cup of tea, but I think he's an underrated politician. I can't believe I'm going to go off the air here praising Al Gore, but this is going to ruin my reputation, but this is calling it as I see it here.
So in 2008, who would be the strongest Republican nominee?
Boy, that is a tough question. I don't know, Giuliani, Romney, McCain, it's an interesting field. I think any of those three.
Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard. I think you dodged the question.
I did, yeah, that was good.
On behalf of the students at the University of Denver, at Pace University, at George Mason University, we want to thank our guest, the editor and publisher of the Weekly Standard, former Chief of Staff, the Vice President Dan Quayle.